Hi, and welcome to Random Rogers Big Picture for the week of June 8th. Do you remember that Saturday Night Live skit with Marty Culp and Bobby Mohan Culp? They run the music department over at the Altadena Middle School, and they might say, "Oh, hot mic, hot market. Can we get a check on this market? Hot market." Things got very zesty Friday with a whole bunch of things. Oil went berserk both Thursday and Friday. The dollar got hit very hard. What's new? There's some sort of talk of escalation in Israel with what it may or may not do as far as attacking its neighbors. Good grief. Kind of odd that I found that article on Nouriel Roubini's site and posted it, and now, there's talk about it being, closer to reality. Who knows what the reality of the story is? It's so fluid, it could change a lot over the weekend, and so I'm not laying a probability to it, but one way or another, the market couldn't have ignored that news, let's put it that way. Inflation this week seems to be getting talked about differently than it had been for a while. Brazil, Indonesia, the Philippines, all raised rates. The New Zealand, Reserve Bank of New Zealand they held rates steady and talked about, that their tone was dovish, which hurt their currency. But data out of Australia makes it look like they're going to need to continue to raise rates. China, there's some kind of scary things happening there in terms of inflation, what inflation might mean. Part of the story here is the raising of caps on fuel prices in some of these countries. Indonesia is one. China another, where there's talk of raising the caps and so forth. This makes for really quite a volatile cauldron of information, stuff that in the short term, in the micro, is market moving. I don't know that it changes things too much longer term, at least in terms of my thinking. Roscoe's here to join us. Good boy, Roscoe. Doesn't change things too much from the standpoint of normal bear market, normal end of a cycle. These things take however long they take. They work themselves out, and then a new recovery, a new cycle starts. The new recovery, as a function of this, whenever it comes, might be shallower. Okay. The expansion, in terms of stock market points, may not be as good. So here I'm talking GDP number and stock market growth. Don't know about that. I mean, theoretically, I've thought for a while that, that's going to be the case, is a little less growth than maybe what we're used to. That'll either turn out to be right or wrong. But none of this changes everything. Bear markets, offer news headlines and other global events, offer headlines that sound scary. We've had currencies collapse. We've had governments default. Scary sounding things happen. Yet, at some point, they right themselves one way or another, whether they actually endure something bad or not. These things work their way through the cycle, and at some point, and this is a response I left to a frustrated reader comment on Friday, capitalism figures a way around these things. Maybe you can do it quickly, and maybe not. That's tough to say, but it does happen. And so if you're worried about the down, I guess it was 42 points on the S&P 500, well, I'd rather not be down 42 points, but we were normal bear market stuff. And so to worry too much about it in the context of, is this different, probably the wrong thing to do. One way or another, capitalism is going to figure a workaround. And so if you are managing your own portfolio, you need to be able to be in touch with what that ends up being. It might mean having all of your money outside the country, not literally, but in terms of, buying all foreign stocks as a very extreme example, or putting all your money in, the cash portion all in foreign currency ETFs. Or maybe it means bringing everything back home while the world figures out its screwiness. The point is, I'm not saying it's not dynamic and fluid, it's both of those things, but it's not going to create something that is different. It's not the end of capitalism or anything like that. No matter how scary the headlines get, at some point, all of these things work their way through, they end, and they turn up. It makes sense to expect that stock market prices will do that before the reality does that. Meaning, if somehow Rubini's what he was talking about comes to play, the Straits of Hormuz are cut off, oil goes up to $200, all of these other things that would seem to hurt everything in the scenario that he passed along to readers. Okay, that takes however long it takes, and then it resolves, and then a new cycle begins. It does not mean in the meantime that you should do nothing. That does not mean, pie in the sky. It means that any emotion you could possibly come up with is not going to change what happens. So there's no point in being emotional. I've been talking for ages about how I'm moderately defensively exposed or hedged. I'm positioned in client accounts. I figured out what to do to get more offensive. I figured out what to do to get more defensive. But in the meantime, we're kind of right where we've been for months, and so I haven't really needed to take a whole lot of action. I don't really care what direction it goes from a doing my job standpoint. It's going to go one direction or the other, and I'm just going to do what I need to do. I think that's great advice for whatever it is you have in mind. From the job of managing your portfolio, whether it's protecting your assets, if that's what circumstance give us, or if it means growing the portfolio, it's going to be one or the other over the next 12 or 24 months. Do what's appropriate for your circumstance and consistent with what what you perceive your skill level to be. Invariably, we all misperceive our skill one way or the other. But do what is appropriate for you. Know that whatever this is now, it's not always going to be this, and react accordingly. I don't want to give you the impression that I'm being Pollyanna-ish. This will work out in whatever manner it's going to work out, over what timetable, and then the new expansion begins. We've endured all sorts of bad over the last 100 years. This is not going to be different. Hopefully that makes sense. Have a great weekend.